All right, so we're going to get started on our first project here, which is the LoopLap theme. So what we're going to do when we create a new project is create a new folder. I'm going to put mine on my desktop. I'm going to call this LoopLab. And then we're going to just grab everything that's in the BS4 boiler and just copy that and bring it over. Okay, so that will basically be our starting point for each project. So now I'm going to open this folder up in VS Code. And let's open up our index.html, and we're just going to open this. I'm going to use live server, but you can just open the HTML or use some kind of other server or whatever you'd like. So let me just bring that over, and we just have a blank page. All right, so I'm just going to be kind of switching back and forth here. Now the first thing I want to start with is the navigation. So when I build something with Bootstrap or with any UI framework, or even just HTML, CSS, I always go start to bottom, which is what I think most people do. So we're going to go right here where it says start here, and let's put in our navbar. So remember, it's a nav class, or I'm sorry, a nav tag, but it has a class of navbar. And then we want to do navbar dash expand, and here's where we want to put the size, where basically we want it to turn responsive, and I'm going to put small SM. And then let's make it a dark background, so we'll say BG dark. And then we're going to also add the navbar dark class, which will make sure that the text reflects that of a dark navbar. And then I'll hit tab, and then that gives us all of our classes. Okay. Oh, one more class I wanted to add was fix top, because I wanted to stick to the top of the screen. Okay, and everything, pretty much every class that we do in these themes, everything we do, we've already gone over in the Sandbox, so I'm not really going to go in depth on what each thing does, because we've already went over it. This is more like a code along, and so you can see how projects are put together, how different sections are put together. And then underneath the nav, or I should say in between the nav, we want to put a container to move all the content to the middle. And then we're going to put the branding area, so that'll be an A tag with the class of navbar brand. And this is just going to go to index.html. Okay, this is a one-page theme. And then for the text here, we're just going to say LoopLab. And then underneath that, we want basically our hamburger menu, or our collapse button. So let's say button, and we're going to give it a class of navbar-toggler. And then remember, this takes some extra attributes. It takes a data toggle, and we want to set that to collapse. And then it takes a data target, because it needs to know basically what it's going to target, what ID. So I'm going to put an ID of navbar collapse. And then inside the actual button, we want to put a span tag with the class of navbar-toggler-icon. And that should automatically give us that little 3 lines icon. So that's our button. Now we want to create the div with the ID of this navbar collapse. So we're going to go right under the button, and let's create a div. First of all, we'll give it a class of collapse, because we don't want it to show by default. And then we also want to give it a class of navbar-collapse. And then we want the ID to be whatever we put here, okay, not including the hashtag. So we'll paste that in like that. All right, and then inside this div is where we want to put our UL. So it'll be a UL, and it'll have a class of navbar-nav. And also I want to align it to the right, so I want to put a class of ML margin left-auto. And then we just want our items. So let's say li, we'll give it a class of nav item. And then each link will have a class of nav-link, like that. All right, and then this, like I said, this is going to be a one-page theme where we're going to implement that smooth scrolling. So these links actually have to point to IDs. So this one will go to #home. And let's put in here just home. And then what I'll do is just copy this whole thing. And we want to do 2, 3, 4. So the second one is going to go to the section of Explore. So we'll say ID Explore. This one here is going to go to Create. So we want to put an ID of Create. And then the last one will go to Share. And we'll say ID Share. Okay. Actually, you know what? Each section is going to have like a head area. So we actually want these to go not to Explore, but to Explore Head Section, like that. So create head section, share head section. Okay, so that should do it for the navbar. Now, if we save this and we take a look, it should look like this. It's just a basic Bootstrap navbar. Now, I want to add some custom styling. So we're going to head over to our CSS file. And I'm just going to make the body, so the entire body I want to have a dark background. So I'm going to say background hash 333, which is a hexadecimal value for almost black, a really dark gray. And we want to make the color white, of course, so that we can see it. And then for the navbar class itself, we're going to grab onto that, and we want a border on the bottom. So we're going to say border bottom, and we're going to set that to a hexadecimal value of 008 ED6. I want it to be 3 pixels, and I want it to be solid. And then I'm going to just set an opacity, which is like a transparency of 0.8. So let's save that and go back. And there we go. So we have a dark background. We also have this border on our navbar. So we're going to go ahead and stop here, and in the next section, or I should say the next video, we're going to do the home section. So basically like the big showcase area. So we will get to that next.